Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative take about the world around me. All right, so before I get into it, I want to give thanks again to the sponsor and to the support of Mantra Matcha. And it's can't stress enough, great people working for the company. And I just think it's really good to get that balance and holistic part. They get that balance, the holistic part of it, of the products. They really do it well. And if you all feel the same, you enjoy products like that, please take advantage of this great offer. You can get a 15% discount, and all you simply have to do is use code The Harboring when checking out. Again, that's The Harboring when checking out. And again, great thanks to the sponsor, Mantra Matcha. All right, so let's get into the midst of everything. So some of the audio platforms that I'm on Speaker, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. These are just to name a few. And I can't stress enough, feedback is immensely important. I appreciate those who have done so. Continue to do it. And I encourage those who just, you have questions, comments, concerns. You just want to reach out, say something. Feel free. And even if you might have show ideas, feel free to weigh in. The best way to do that is through email. All right, so the topic of choice here is to wrap everything up for the month of October and with the holiday. Well, not holiday. Well, some people consider Halloween a holiday. I don't. But with the festivities of Halloween is how the Gothic style came to be in the origins and everything within that, the Gothic style, fashion style, that is. Here we go. All right, so before I get into the midst of everything about the facts, I want to give thoughts. So my first introduction about the aspects of Gothic and all of these things, I mean, I saw it sort of really, it really came into its own. And then, even before then, because that's when it started, pretty early on. But, and I would say that he coined himself with that sort of style with Tim Burton. And specifically, I remember when I first saw Edward Scissorhands. And especially with Winona Ryder. And you can say she took on the new approach, a new wave order approach, I guess you can say, to more of a contemporary style, Gothic style. And this is really present in the aspects of when she was in Beetlejuice, and then not so much in Edward Scissorhands, but more along the lines when she was in Beetlejuice. So getting back to Edward Scissorhands. All right, so the way that the whole attire, everything with Johnny Depp's character, which is Edward, it just all was pinpointing to the aspects of this certain genre of bleak, self-loathing, and that was the exterior and for the most part, of what Johnny Depp's internal world was supposed to represent. But it was quite interesting with the aspects of how, that was pretty much the whole premise for the movie. Do not judge. Don't be so quick to judge, because even though Johnny Depp's character did embrace that on the outside, and the inside he had a childlike spirit, and which was really pronounced in the obstacles that he went through and all of that. Now, going on to Beetlejuice here, with Lydia Dietz, with her character. Oh my gosh, that was quintessential goth at its finest here. And then I'll go to Ali Sheedy in her, role. I think her name was Allison. I'm not quite sure, in the Breakfast Club. So anyhow, this whole thing where there's this sort of depressing motif about her. This is just started out with the aspects of being pulled from her home, which is, from what I understand, was they lived in New York, and they were around. The way that she was describing everything, and then the way that, particularly with her mother and how they were probably living around the Soho area or something like, and then becoming the meatpack industry district, and that sort of industrialized atmosphere. And then in herself, she was talking about all the friends, and she has to transition to these aspects of middle of nowhere, sort of small town attire. That's one thing. And then from everything, the way she wears, which goes into the aspects of the funeral attire, of wearing all black, and being more pronounced with the aspects of how she's being, using her artistic bent to express herself through her clothing, and that's the best way she does it, by being, Gothic-esque, and then even her writing style, when she was writing, in the movie, it was very internalizing, very, channeling the spirits of Emily Bronte and all of that. They would have utmost respect for the way that she was writing and expressing her thoughts, and a lot of it was really driven by the stereotypical aspects of teenage emotional turmoil, I guess you could say. And it's quite interesting because the disposition and the transition with that, with the Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin with his character. Unfortunately, he's a character in real life now. But anyway, with that, they in itself, even though, all these morbid things were going on, and she was very representative of, the morbid, as you can say. They were, taken aback that she wasn't frightened by them. And then the best way to wrap everything up with the theme that is evoking with the Gothic style is when she said this. She said, of course I'm paraphrasing here now. She's goes along the lines of saying, they express themselves as morbid and weird. I am, and then myself am morbid and weird. And so I said before that what you wear really is a walking billboard, for the most part, of what you think. And so it's quite interesting when you get into the midst of everything about the aspects of the Gothic style. Oh, yeah, let me get back to... I'll finish this point and I'll get back to Al Sheedy here. All right, with the Gothic style, it's really expressing a certain point of view about the perspective of and internalizing yourself, your of your place in culture. And Ali Sheedy's character, you really evoke that because her character was always in this disposition of trying to find herself and not knowing and thinking the best way to do that is to go branch out, run off. And the best way that she could show how this internal struggle with what she was dealing with is to dress in this Gothic attire. And in The Cure, too, with the aspects of, bands like that, Sisters of Mercy. That's more, you can say maybe Sisters of Mercy is more in a different element there, but it's not as, and you can say that too with, depending on the arc, the time frame in which the different albums were coming out from The Cure, that everything wasn't centered so much around the aspects of woe is me, for the most part. But the main point here is, these depictions in movies, television, music, they all center around the aspects of addressing the topic of the afterlife in very different ways. With that said, I'm going to get into the origin and the aspects of the Gothic style, fashion style. Here we go. All right, now, of course, sources will be provided for you in this episode, okay? So, it says the Gothic style originated in the early 1980s from a fusion of post-punk music, Victorian mourning attire and dark romanticism. With the release of the Bacchus, Bela Lugosi's Dead, which was released in 1979, often cited as the first Gothic record. Its roots extended further back to the 19th century with the literature genres of the Gothic fiction, which was characterized by themes of horror, decay, and dark romanticism, as seen in the works of authors such as Edgar Allan Poe. And as I said, it's quite interesting because with Edgar Allan Poe, it's just one of those things. Is the bearer of what your work is remembered for, on to different generations. Because Edgar Allan Poe wrote so many different aspects of, humanity. And it's just interesting how, that is the piece of work that he's best known for. So let's get more into it here. It says that and Bram Stoker. And the Victorian era's tradition of wearing black mourning clothes was popularized through Queen Victoria after Prince Albert's death in 1861. So the modern goth subculture emerged from the nightclubs like the Batcave in London, where bands and fans developed the style through music and fashion. Again, music and fashion. Music is very prolific because music in itself is a wide mass medium or mass platform of an expression of specific things. And then when you tie into fashion, it just makes a whole lot of sense for them to go hand in hand because, it in itself, as I said, fashion expresses. It's the simplest way to express what people think or how people feel, and so that's going to match the point of the certain genre of music here. All right, so new key influence punk movements such as glam rock and the New Romantics. Well, the other pioneers was Susie Sue, Peter Murphy, and Robert Smith of The Cure, as I said. Now, Susie Sue, with the aspects of Susie and the Banshees and all these different bands here, which I really enjoy the music. And then Peter Murphy, I enjoy his music too. So these two different, they're very. You can see how they fit into that genre. Not only with their attire and how they look, because specifically with Susie Sue and and then all that, leather, black leather, black makeup. She's evoking the aspects of looking, like a banshee with the aspects, and then that strong, powerful vocal operatic sound that both of them evoke, even Peter Murphy, to wring hold to the aspects of the emotional driven point of view of the goth sound, which is you're driving home the emphasis of the internalizing struggles for something. Hold on just a minute. All right, sorry about that. The weather is changing here, and I'm sure y'all all feel it. And my body is adjusting, but it's all good. So anyway, that Gothic music, for the most part, for the better part of it, it really drives home with touching into the depths and the realms of heartbreak at its finest, or different aspects of other well, not only heartbreak, but the aspects of misunderstanding and so many other things that comes with it. The aspects of wanting more, of belonging, and so many other countless, even the aspects of economic placement. So many things go is really expressed quite nicely, when you get into the Gothic arena of music too. All right, so the style draws heavily on the historical fashion from the Victoria Edwardian and the Bella Europea eras, which incorporate elements like the corset, lace, fishnets, and dramatic makeup. Now, the term Gothic itself has a long history, originally used during the Renaissance to describe medieval architecture before being adopted for literature and later for the modern subculture. So early style icons such as the silent film star Theda Barba and 1950s TV personality Vampiria, which Vampiria, from what I understand, was the inspiration for Turn Into Elvira, or something like that, if I'm not mistaken, are recognized and as the foundation figures of Gothic fashion, which was predating the modern movement. All right, so I'm going to get into some more facts about this subgenre or this subculture. So how does the word go from describing a group of nomadic Germanic tribes to describing social outcasts being body modifications and shadowy wardrobes? It says, so to discuss the elements of the goth subculture that is set aside from other alternative genres, it's important to understand where the term goth originated. So they're saying you have to go back on a trip to go to 300 AD. This was around the time when the Roman Empire reigned supreme, and it held the unprecedented power from its conception from the year 27 BCE. However, the presence of a group of nomadic Germanic people, the Goths, would be the key dissolving to this authority. The Goths were split into two main groups: the Western Visigoth tribe and the Eastern Osgoth tribe. So the Western Visigoth were descendants of earlier Gothic people. The forgive me for the pronunciation. They're Viking, who first invaded the Roman Empire in 376 and defeated the Romans at the Adrianople in 378. So after this defeat, the Romans and the Goths were able to maintain one of the earliest examples of frenemy status. You know, they're friends but enemies here. That's quite interesting. And they say that this new term, frenemy, was first put into the dictionary, first well known when it comes to pop culture. They pin this to the relationship, for those who know, you know. And I was around that generation with Nikki Hilton. Well, I'm not Nikki Hilton. Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie. They categorize their relationship as frenemies. All right, so being both trading partners and weary combats over the next decades or so, until Alaric I was named the first king of the Visigoths. So in 410, Alaric I mounted his people from an invasion of Italy, which led to the successful sacking of Rome and the fall of the Roman Empire. So this led to the Goths controlling land from present-day Germany to the Danube and Don rivers into Eastern Europe, and from the Black Sea in the south and the Baltic Sea in the north. So for these reasons, many consider the rise of the Goths to power to be the start of the medieval period in Europe. So this also marked the beginning of the term Goth, being seen as representative of themes of barbarism and being barbaric and destructive, that is. So the designation of Goth fell out of favor until the Renaissance period, when it was used in a derogatory manner to describe medieval architecture. So Goth architecture was considered by those in the Renaissance period to be harsh and Gothic. So even then, you know, cat's claws coming out as to saying what's hot, what's not, you know. The flying buttress, extravagant stained glass windows, and the harshly pointed arches were seen as tawdry in comparison to the simplicity and the elegance that was characterized as the classical and neoclassical architectural style that rose to prominence at the time. So the term first applied to the style in the 1530s by I know he's a well-known painter, but I'm sorry, Giorgio Vasari, who used Goths synonymously with the barbaric aspects of when classifying medieval art and architecture. So in the mid 18th century, Goth emerged again to identify another form of art literature. By the 19th century, novels and poetry encompassed, that is, themes of the paranormal and decay. So the macabre came into the limelight through the efforts of famous authors such as Bram Stoker and Edgar Allan Poe. Similar to the aforementioned Gothic architecture, Gothic literature was seen as a reaction against conviction. So at this point, the conceptualization of Goth had been set in stone. So Goth became distinctive of a counterculture, one of which was marked by dark, gloomy, and garish motifs. So as the 1960s and 70s went along, this was the era of the hippie movement, and the bands such as the Beatles and the Grateful Dead skyrocketing to fame in the top topping the charts in the music realm here. So bright colors, mellow music, and often psychedelic drugs were quintessential to the popular culture of the time. So in the midst of all of this, there was a rise of yet another counterculture movement. This was the goth rock. The term goth rock was coined by the legendary music critic John Stickney in '67 when describing the meeting he had with Jim Morrison discussing the Doors. So through the 70s, many bands emerged that would later be considered staples of Gothic rock genres. So among these was Susie and the Banshees, as I said, Joy Division, The Cure, the Bacchus, and Killing Joke. However, the goth rock genre was solidified in year 1980 when Joy Division released their album Closer, before the lead singer Ian Curtis took his own life later that year. And then out of this, we get New Order. After the passing of Ian Curtis, I think he was the drummist, or and then he did vocals for him. But anyhow, he became the front man that was in Joy Division. It broke off and became New Order. So when it comes to music, every genre needs a scene, and goth rock was no different. So for goth rock, this scene was found early in London. So before spreading to other majors locally, like New York and Hollywood, soon this music composed of plenty of reverb, melancholic melodies, minor or bass chords, and the themes of sadness and being morbidity here. It was sweeping through the underground scenes through most of Europe and the U.S. As most music scenes, listeners of goth rock music took on specific fashion choices in order to reflect their interest to the outside world. So clothing themes included dark colors, primarily black, paired with similarly dark makeup and hair. So in contrast to the shadowy look, many goth individuals wore pale or white skin makeup to make their skin appear much paler. This creates a striking contrast between the body and the stylistic choices of the individual. Additionally, religious and the occult adornments became prevalent in the Gothic subculture. The spread of music accompanied by style choices represented brought the term goth to what we know it as today. So today, goth is a subculture that comprises many different smaller subcultures. So for instance, there are cyber goths, romantic goths, steampunks, which is really neat and interesting, and the whole atmosphere with steampunk, making an awareness to the aspects of merging and calling out, from what I understand, this is my point of view about it, the Industrial Revolution and its way in it, and, making a culture around it, and merging together the aspects of that with modernity. And it's quite interesting. I like the style. It's pretty neat. I like it a lot. Goth abilities and countless others. So while being goth is often depicted in the media as being a loner, those in the community have a rich social foundation founded in an appreciation of similar hobbies, values, and interests. So after all, in the end, we can all learn a bit from goths. So taking a step to stand out against the greater society isn't necessarily a negative thing. So in fact, we believe feeling confident enough in yourself, your interests will stay far from the norm and be admired. So I'm going to wrap it up by saying these things. I know this is a cliche, but it like Machine Gun Kelly making a song out of, say, I know it's a cliche, but anyhow, my point being here, sometimes you have to say what works for you is what works for you. And the Gothic style is a really good example of how that really is something that's true, that reigns true. So what do I mean by this? Now, as I said, and if you heard and as you stated, as it stated, the evolution of the Gothic style is quite different and pulls from different situations and reasons for the situation. And though that's why it's important to know your history, because if you know your history, you know where you're going. And so, out of the realm, this is not for everyone, but most people can relate into the aspects of feeling disillusioned by something, or wanting, loathing about something, or wanting to understand, just simply wanting to understand. That's what's most at the heart of the matter. And if you keep on reigning true to your perspective of how you really think about things, people will catch on, and it'll withstand the test of time, and people will take notice of it. Now, when you get into the matter of fact, or you get into the mentality of saying, hey, my way is much better than you, and you're a fool for thinking otherwise, that's when destruction happens and polarization happens, and people really get warped in their sense of reality. And that's what I think is the difference with styles like this. It was never forced upon people to say, hey, you have to like how I look or how I feel or whatever. Even though, most of the times it was depicted like that, it really wasn't that way. It was like, if I look strange or different, okay, but hey, that's just me. And that's something to say about that. There's something that can be said about that. All right, so feel free to reach out and give me comments about this episode. And also, happy early Halloween. And I'll say happy Halloween again on Friday when it actually is Halloween. All right, so tune in, turn up, and definitely take care. Bye-bye for now.